and welcome to episode 189 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is June 27th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone. So, when was the last time you thought about security, especially in the context of your SAP system? When preparing for this podcast, I did a little research on SAP and security, and it's actually pretty horrifying how many incidents are even documented in public. I guess there are even more incidents happening every day across the world. So securing your SAP system becomes more and more important. To talk a little more about zero trust security principles for SAP, I'm really glad to have a number of experts with us today. Joe Speziale, Daniel Mauser, and of course, the one and only Evren Buyruk. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Before we get started and go into the topic, maybe let's start by introducing yourself. Who wants to get started? Joe, maybe you get started.
All right, I'll get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Speziale. I am based in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I am Director for Customer Success in our International CSU, Customer Success Unit. I lead a team of Azure Infrastructure and Security Solution Architects, and we cover the largest global companies in the world. I've been with Microsoft 13 and a half years and have done almost everything, I feel like, from Azure to modern work and security and everything in between. So happy to be here and have this conversation.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us, Joe.
I can be the
Maybe
next.
Daniel? Yes.
So my name is Daniel Mauser. I'm part of the Azure networking, network security global black belt team. And what we do is interact with the large customers in Azure and talk about connectivity. And also when we talk about connectivity, we have also to talk about security.
Security, yeah.
And usually what we deal with is large customers, S500, and what I have to bring to the table is my experiences that I have with those interactions. I've been 17 years at Microsoft, and looking forward for this conversation and expand on the zero trust conversation.
Cool, great, Daniel. And Evren, we could actually skip you. No, just go. Joking.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, hi, everyone. Holger, thank you so much for inviting us. So it's a pleasure to be here. And my name is Evren Buyruk. I am Principal Cloud Solution Architect from Microsoft. And I am part of the Microsoft International Customer Success Unit. This gentleman, the handsome gentleman, Joe Speziale, is actually my leader. So he has been sponsoring the security initiatives and all the programs that we actually just delivered within our organization. So on a day-to-day basis, I am one of the cloud solution architects in Americas assigned to SAP and SAP line of businesses. And then my daily activities are all around apps, infra, and securing the application and infrastructure of SAP. And also provide some blogs and some articles around augmenting the secure posture of enterprise-grade customers.
Perfect.
So,
perfect.
In a nutshell, is who I am.
No, and that's fantastic. I mean, honestly, you do this day in, day out, looking at security in the context of SAP, but I'm not doing this all the time. I do it whenever I have a podcast with you, basically, or something similar, but I really did some research today, and for me it was really shocking how many incidents you can find. And again, like what I said in the intro, these are just the cases that are documented, where the press or someone talks about this. And I guess most of the companies don't even talk about incidents that have happened. So I think this is a super critical issue right now, and ideally even more customers would talk about it and then really put the spotlight on this. So how do we get started? What do you see with customers?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it is just like, is continuous effort from the customer side. So like when we're looking at the secure posture of any customer and we're talking about zero trust security, like we touch on topics like DMZ, demilitarized zone, for the security posture or augmenting the customer security environment or their data, we are actually just looking at the whole picture, not necessarily on the network connectivity and protecting the data, like doing encryptions and doing certain measures to augment the posture. So we also take a look at brute force attacks and how customer actually is viewing the the data on a day-to-day basis, how they're getting connected to the systems, what they do to react when there is a breach or there's an incident going on, because one little tiny incident that actually is being noticed by the customer might be the culprit for company-wide breach that might occur. So so that's why customers security operation teams, they're actually literally every day just working on making sure their investment on any public cloud is actually secure. So when we're looking at Azure perspective, we make sure customers really just understand the core principles, so core areas where Microsoft really emphasizes. But unfortunately, the best practices that we actually just described, like networking security, for example, or data security, let's say the disk security where the application resides, we can only provide the best practices. And Microsoft has been making billions of dollars of investment every day to augment the security posture of Microsoft's servers, storage, networking, where customers reside on. Basically, when a customer actually comes to Azure, they're also benefiting from Microsoft investment. But unfortunately, just because that Microsoft Azure is secure, or we say it is secure, hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, you're good to go. There are lots of things that they need to do. So every day, what we do with customers, like Daniel, he's just going to share his insight. We make sure that customers understand this is ongoing effort and it's not going to end. So basically, we won't have the desired state. That desired state is going to continue because breach is going to continue, or the attempt to breach is going to continue. The bad actors are always going to find ways to actually just infiltrate. So then, as you remember that a few episodes ago, that was the DDoS topic that I covered. Yep. And then I said exactly the same thing. These are the best practices that we say. These are the technologies customers might use, but if they have other ideas, they can actually just share those with us to make sure that we actually just fill in the gaps, to make sure that their security requirements are met, because it is only the customer who's going to know what exactly they need. So what we can do is to incorporate Microsoft technologies into consumable products, so that they can actually just implement all these technologies. But the ball is on their camp. So they have to actually just take the initiative. I mean, that is how I can actually just start the topic. But of course, that Joe, Daniel, I mean, your insights are going to be important.
Just one thing to add there, or to put some emphasis there. I have the feeling, for example, if I look at Microsoft 365, the whole concept of multi-factor authentication or security access, that is something that a lot of customers have already understood and adopted. But I still have the feeling that, especially with SAP, this is something where a lot of customers are just thinking, well, my SAP system is behind a firewall and it's safe and that's it. And they forget that this is a really important system and they need to take a look at this. And that's why I think this approach of Microsoft Zero, or applying the concept of Microsoft Zero Trust also to the SAP system and raising their awareness that customers actually start looking at this and look at the functionalities and features. I think that's really, really critical. But yeah, Joe, Daniel, would be really interesting to get your insights. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that for my team and just what we're seeing in terms of the current landscape and security, assume breach is the biggest phrase that comes up often, right? Just assuming that there's breach at some point within your, topology. So I think for us, a big topic here is looking at it holistically and not just a thing that we tend to see with our customers is trying to isolate security in certain areas, right, of their environment. And what's great is that you got to take a step back and look more holistically, because the point we always say is that if there's probably assumed breach, there's probably a bad actor somewhere in the environment. And by the time you actually discovered that bad actor, they may have already done a few things within your environment before you ever even caught them, right? So that's probably how I'm currently looking at it within my team, is looking at it at a higher level versus just individual layers, and kind of looking at it from that perspective. Daniel?
Yeah, I agree. Just to complement, right? And on the point of what Evren said, it's a shared responsibility, right? When you move to the cloud, and that's what customer has to be in mind. So Microsoft is doing that. Its part on the infrastructure. We do have a lot of products that we offer, but it's the customers that they need to understand those products, or those options, and how to implement those on the environment. And there's another aspect that I see customers who, on the migration side, they are moving out from the on-premises mindset to the cloud. They need to navigate on the options that the Microsoft has to offer as a first-party product, options like Microsoft Defender. But for those customers as well, they need to understand that there are other options if they want to replicate what they have in on-premises, third-party. Most of the third-party products, we do have options on our marketplace. And I think we're going to go over this discussion and dig on the options. And I hope when you get to each one of those points, I can share my experience on the specific topics related to network security and how the customers, they can leverage with success those components.
Yeah, I can definitely understand. If I'm a customer, I have maybe used already some security products on-prem. Now I move to the cloud, and maybe I just want to leverage these tools again because they feel familiar. Now, where I'm really impressed actually is what we are doing at Microsoft there, that we not only have this great portfolio of security products, but we're also looking how can we make them SAP specific. Like if I look at Sentinel for SAP, for Defender, there are all these SAP specific products as well. So very much like what Joe you said, that we need to look this from a holistic point of view. So Sentinel can cover a lot of things, but then we also help now customers to really look into the SAP system. So even if we are using something like Sentinel that covers a lot of things, we make sure that we are also really good in SAP. And then we have all these other services, and a lot of these services now have more of SAP specific functionalities. But again,
and also,
go ahead.
Yeah, and also when a customer actually just looks at SAP security, and then if they're new on Azure, so they actually just get into all the details of networking, and then like encryption topics. For example, there are many customers who are actually new to some concept like AES, for example. Like when they open a storage account, they actually just start with the AES 256. So then they say, all right, this is a little bit like above my head. So what exactly happens is they actually just learn how Microsoft makes sure that the SAP application that is going to be on Azure is going to be encompassed by everything that you actually just see here in the slide. For example, that when a customer comes to Azure, they say, all right, you know what, we have the DMZ approach, for example, or we have the DMZ architecture. So what they say that like, hey, what Microsoft thinks about DMZ from your point of view, what exactly it is. So it is either 2-layer or 3-layer of security and protection concept with additional like user-defined routes, for example, or firewall rules. But in the same time, customer says, all right, so this is how we're doing it today. And then this is how we actually verify the source IP address, for example. What are the techniques that Microsoft can provide? Let's say that if we want to do like, IDPS, for example, what exactly we need to do, because we only have layer 7, for example. They say we have layer 7, what exactly that we should do to augment it. Do we need to get firewall, for example? Or if we get a firewall, how are we just going to make sure that we can enable the IDPS protection, for example, on top? So then this really just like, opens up, a broader topic, broader, area where the customer is looking at every single thing so that they understand that it is not only the SAP security, but it is also like all the surrounding security parameters that they need to take a look, like DDoS protection, for example, like encryption, and then like how they're going to do the key management, how they were doing it before, what exactly they need to do to manage the certificates, or what exactly they need to actually save in their safe box, for example. Let's say that how they're going to manage the Azure Key Vault. So these are all the things that actually just come in place. And then the more the information the customer provides to us, we have better visibility. So then I think what we do from Microsoft side pretty good is the assessment, so that we actually can identify what their key requirements are to make sure that we can actually just bring some of the technologies. So then, of course, then it actually just opens up the zero trust model. So what exactly it is, what the customer asks Microsoft. Hey, tell us about what Microsoft thinks about the zero trust model. So it is a modern security framework to manage the complexity of their organization from the security point of view. But again, this is like a unending technology portfolio that Microsoft is going to be providing to these customers. Lots of customizations as well. Basically, it really is a learning curve for both Microsoft and also the end customers, because each and every customer, they have their different requirements, but they have a common denominator, is actually just securing their data. So what they do with Microsoft is to identify what technologies that we have, and then how we are actually just looking at the zero trust principles. For example, verify explicitly, use privileged access control, and assuming breach. These are the zero trust principles. I think these are universal, and then customers really just want to focus on these three fundamentals, like how exactly that Microsoft authenticate and authorize based on all the available data points by way of using like condition access policies, for example, for their Azure VPN gateway connections, or their secure shell, or even let's say that remote desktop for their user to virtual machine connectivity. And then how Microsoft actually just sees using the least privilege access control, what exactly that Microsoft thinks about that. And then, so then they actually just get it, weigh it to understand it, if we're aligning with their understanding from least privilege access control. And then they actually just learn about just in time or just enough, access. These are actually just new concepts, and also like, new privilege access management. So they actually just learn a lot of things from Microsoft. For example, they know when to use the static connectivity association key, for example, we call it CAK for Azure Express Route with, direct ports, and using managed identity that they can authenticate Express Route circuit resources. So there are lots of things. I'm not going to go into like, very much in details, but the reality is all about how the customer sees security, and then what Microsoft has readily available for them to leverage. But we are not going to actually just like mandate any of these technologies. They are going to be the decision makers to adopt certain technologies to address their needs. But what Microsoft is not going to do, we are not going to take a look at the deployment of the customer or their blueprint or their plan, and we are not going to be actually nonchalant about the environment. If we see any points where the customer needs to focus on, we are going to make sure that they are going to understand all the pros and cons of certain solutions before they actually implement it. So it is how my team, Joe, actually just manages this team, of cloud solution architects working with the customers on a day-to-day basis. So basically, We got the technologies, but interpretation of these technologies is so important. So if the customer is not necessarily, absorbing some of the key principles of these technologies, we make sure that we give them all the tools and technologies and POC environments like proof of concept, for example, so that they can conduct their own proof of concepts to make sure that these technologies are going to work for them. Otherwise, it is just going to be redundant. It is just going to be waste of their time. So we make sure they understand all these components are actually just going to be understood by the customer, so they can actually just make their decisions accordingly. So Daniel, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. So it comes with that concept of defense in depth, right? Where you have the layers that you need to build. Given an example, where I have my SAP, my application, where I have my data that I need to protect, which layers that I need to build on front of it, right, to mitigate. And the concept of Microsoft and that security in depth it's kind of tied to mitigate those three pillars of the security trust, right, that we saw on the last slide, which is pretty much like it's summarized in the protect, detect, and respond, right? So which components I can add on those layers that can act to protect my my resources, to detect, right? Not just lateral movements, which is one of the things that the attackers, the actors, the bad actors are going to leverage a lot on the on that zero trust approach. And going to this slide, which is pretty much like talks about in the network security, and you have to think about in those layers, right? Network security, application, and that is a big component on top, which also was explained in the last slide or previous slide, which is the identity, right?
Yeah.
Which is another big thing as well. And just like giving a few examples over here on the network connectivity as an example of how you can enforce that security. For example, on the number one, we're gonna go, I think we do have a specific slide on number one, we can dig a little bit more, is access my network using a client VPN. How they're gonna do it, right? So which kind of technology we can use, for example, enter conditional access. For example, you can make sure, for example, we can enforce MFA before the user gets into the network. On the conditional access also, you can create other policies if the user changes, for example, from a cafe or something like a public Wi-Fi. We're going to do extra enforcements to make sure the user can get into the network. So those are examples that we can leverage. Few things. I think MFA, as you mentioned, Holger, earlier, is a basic thing that most of the customers, they have to use today. And we can go over on the next aspects of specific for network security. And I think we're going to have a specific slides on how we can protect the customers in each one of those layers.
Yeah. May I ask, I mean, you started to talk at the beginning about these customers moving from on-prem to Azure and so on. Is there, and we saw the architecture, the best practice with all these different blocks. Is there something with which you would recommend customers get started? Like, for example, the VPN access, or is there, so would you, what I try to say is, or to ask is there any recommendations for you for the customer to get started, to look at a good network layout? Is this the first thing that they should do, or should they look at implementing MFA from the very beginning? Or are you saying, no, look, everything is of equal importance, so they need to do everything at once?
Yeah, everything is equally important, right? So the customers, they need to understand is, so when I'm migrating from on-premises to the cloud, we're going to bring up what we call hybrid connectivity, right? So hybrid connectivity, we're going to have different ways to connect from on-premises to the cloud. So if you think about, obviously, user VPN is one example that I gave before, but we do have also Azure Bastion as another example, where because remote work is a reality now, and customers, they need to give access to the, so that is different approaches, right? On the classic approach of VPN, if the customer, because there's other technologies that they are more disruptive in terms of, I cannot, if I'm used to use VPN on premises, obviously the VPN, client VPN is going to be the easiest one to go. And okay, but when you go to the cloud, I can add this extra layer of protection with the conditional access, for example, to enforce better security. But if you think about the other type of a hybrid connectivity, we do have my on-premises network connecting to the Azure, my virtual, my VNet, my virtual network, and usually you have few options. So site-side VPN is one of them, and express route. Site-side VPN is an MACsec encrypted tunnel, which is go over the public internet. And express route is going to be the dedicated private connectivity, what you're going to get to, which is our recommendation for most of the large enterprise to go over the express route, more on the, because it gives you that security, because you have that private connectivity that doesn't go over the internet, and you also you have that bandwidth guarantee, which is performance is also another factor that customers are looking for. But also that is the aspect of security. And although you getting that dedicated express route, you can also enforce extra encryption on top of it, right? Again, like Evren has mentioned before. So we're going to give you ways to do the connectivity, and we can give you extra layers or options that you can add secure on top of it. But it's up to the customer to decide that based on the requirements, right? If I'm a regulated industry, if I'm running a PCI compliant application that requires encryption, or I may have legacy applications, for example, and that's a reality. So for some customers, they have legacy applications, they don't have encryption enabled by default, and they need to make sure, because now I'm connecting to the cloud, it's something that's out of my, technically, I need to add that layer of encryption. And in the express route example, if you just get the express route, it's going to just give you the plain connectivity, but you can enforce the either the IPsec tunnel or the MACsec as shown on this slide. So the MACsec is going to be tied only on the express route direct. So we do have two offerings for the express route. You can get the express route today over the provider model, which is the quick and easy way to get connected from on-premises. And you have the ER direct, which pretty much you get a physical port on a Microsoft router cross-connected directly with the customer. So if you want to do the encryption on the provider model, the only option you have is IPsec, because the MACsec is something that you have to do between you as a customer and your router and the Microsoft router. In that case, you need to manage the keys, right? And only support on the direct model. And interesting enough, we do have that key is managed by Key Vault in Azure, right? So when you do the implementation, we do this key management in Key Vault, and the customer is going to add the key on the router side. Then they're going to have the visibility over the express route on the Azure side, and they're going to add the same key, and you're going to do like some sort of like symmetric encryption on top of that traffic that's going over the direct. So, and just to give you also an extra based on which customers they need to decide between the IPsec or MACsec, it's going to depend, because the MACsec offers encryption at the layer 2, which it doesn't have any penalty on the performance, because that's another aspect you have to account. Also, sometimes when you bring security, you may have some like side effects, right?
Yeah.
On the IPsec side, you do have a side effect. What we see mainly, it's because IPsec as a technology, it's not an Azure limitation. Just sharing this as a best practice for the customers. IPsec has a limit because it's an open standard technology. It can only in a virtualized environments can only use in a single core. So if you have an express route, for example, of 10 gigabits a provider, and you add IPsec on top of it, usually you're going to be constrained on the throughput of the IPsec in about 1 to 1.5 gigs of throughput. So imagine that the penalty that I'm going to have, because I have a 10 gig, now I am going to IPsec because I need to add encryption. So I can only add 1 gig. So the workaround for customers in this scenario is to build multiple IPsec tunnels, which in Azure, you can build up to 8 tunnels. So if you think about 1.5 gigabit per tunnel, you can actually reach to the maximum express route throughput. But if you want to go beyond the 10 gigabits, which is the MACsec is the way to go. MACsec, because Express Route Direct offers minimum 10 gig.
Yeah.
And we have the 100 gigabit option that you can add.
And also, and also in addition to what Daniel actually just says, let's say that, there's a penalty, right, on the performance one. So because the bandwidth is always going to be limited to the tunnel bandwidth, so that customer is going to, in order to actually just find a alternative solution or, reduce the bottleneck, they might actually just run multiple tunnels. So to match the express route circuit bandwidth. So there's an option there. So like most of the time, customers are not necessarily aware of these limitations, but once they actually have multiple tunnels, and then they might actually get close to the bandwidth, which actually is provided by the express route. So it's again like all about the customer's requirements. If they actually just want to increase their, networking connectivity, they might go with the, express route alone. Again, like, services provider or express route direct, or they can add IPsec on top. So it's all up to the customer. Like Daniel mentioned that if it is a regulated industry, they might actually just go with that option, and then they can, work on IPsec over express route to augment or just strengthen their connectivity point. So we have lots of options to actually just provide. For example, there's also like, Daniel mentioned that if a customer is using the express route direct ports, so they can actually just increase their network security by enabling the authentication, like, when establishing BGP peers, for example, or they can configure the MACsec to, secure layer 2 communication. But again, this is all about how the customer wants to augment their posture. So we got the technologies, we got the ways to help them, but it's all about, the ball is on their camp. So basically they need to make the decision. So we are ready to actually just provide them with the right solution approaches. So that's why we're actually just putting all this little reference slides. But if I actually go ahead and just populate it with more information that I would, just to give some high overview to the audience, basically, these are the current technologies that we actually just provide to the customers. So of course, when we are speaking with the customers, we actually just talk about, Internet Key Exchange version 1 versus version 2, what exactly it does, what exactly the pros and cons of each and every solution. Just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah.
And also, like, so when we're talking about the security, sometimes customers are also just bringing up some of the topics such as like HA, for example. They say, okay, we have Azure VPN Gateway, and then we would like to understand what exactly Azure VPN Gateway consists of. And then they automatically actually just open up the HA discussion with us, because we actually have active standby configuration when we have Azure VPN Gateway. So basically, for sometimes some customers, they say, hey, we have like planned maintenance or unplanned maintenance, or what about the unplanned disruptions that actually might happen to the active instance, and then how is the standby instance is going to take the failover. So sometimes some customers, some enterprise grade customers, they're actually just mixing HA topic with the security.
Yeah.
So that it actually just becomes, so that's why I think that my job role and then Daniel's job role, we're aligned with apps, infra, security. Basically, we help them understand how this technology is really just like, work, so that they understand that they are going to have the continuation. It is just going to be standby, VPN gateway, how it is just going to take over. So we actually just give some like, easy rule of thumb, calculations, so that they can actually continue the operations. Because for some customers, if the system is disrupted, they are more prone to be breached. So they want to make sure that they're up and running all the time. So that's why when we talk with them, we also make sure that they understand the HA construct that comes with the Zero Trust security model as well.
Makes sense, yeah.
Aside from that, like, again, like I'm actually just, again, bringing up all these, like, reference slides. Daniel actually just spoke about the Bastion, for example. So, but we are still coming back to the express route. It's very important that, like, is very important part of the networking and security for SAP on Azure or any application on Azure, because it is, outside the internet connectivity, which the customers are looking at. So basically, they know that they have the dedicated bandwidth. They know that the traffic is not traversing in the public internet. So this is something that they actually just have, fantastic understanding. Once they go to our collateral and once they actually just work with us, we make sure that they understand how express route, circuit construct works. So what they, like the peering is associated with it, and how they actually can do, public facing workloads, and then the private peering, which is to access the virtual, virtual networks where the ESAP applications are running on.
Mm.
And I just want to compliment you on the comment about availability, right? High availability. So so on the earliest, when you're studying security, one of the first concepts that you have is the CIA, not CIA, as you know, but the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So, so availability is a big component, right? Because you also on this in the security, you have to think about you do have the DDoS, for example, which of my resources are getting exhausted. Do I have alternatives where I can move on my production workload to not get affected by this high type of attack, for example? So it's an important component as well when you're talking about higher availability.
And also one thing that, like, I just remembered, that I had this request from another cloud solution architect on the weight management. So I thought, okay, hey, I took it personally. Hey, are you looking at my weight management? So he was actually just like, referencing to network level connection weight. So one of the customers, this is a customer that is actually in regulated industry. They say, we would like to actually just make sure that we have a really good traffic weight management so that they can prefer one circuit to another. So why they want to do that? Because they know that by default, traffic leaving the VNet is routed based on, equal cost multi-path routing. But connection weight, they can actually just do the routing based on the preferred circuit. So sometimes some customers are actually just doing their multi-segmentation by controlling the traffic, which is stemming from a particular circuit. So it's not only about the traffic network weight management. Some customers, they have their own planning around where they want the traffic to be routed from. So this is something that I want audience to actually just think a little bit. They can reach out to us and I can actually give some, real examples and metrics. But this is something that I started to just see how customers can actually just be granular on the circuit management. So then, of course, then all the other things, because we had the conditional access control, right? And then privileged access control. So these are on the app and access level. What about the express route circuit? So they also want to make some tweaks to at least to manipulate that, traffic management, and then making sure one of the circuit is leveraged more than the other circuit for many reasons. Again, these are, I'm not going to disclose some of the information because I don't really want to reveal any information to the attackers because everybody's listening to these sessions. So I don't want anybody to actually say, hey, you know what, let me just touch on the topic. So then I don't want to give any, any kind of material to anybody. So basically, most of the clients get one circuit within Azure with two virtual paths. And then these are connected to Microsoft Edge router. And then it is where Microsoft actually just provides clients with SLAs. So then we don't necessarily just provide, circuit level SLAs, but it is what the express route partner does with clients. Basically, it actually just opens up, dimensions around how Microsoft actually treats the zero trust security model. Again, we don't have one approach only. The DMZ, which is 2-layer or 3-layer, as I mentioned in the onset of this presentation, we are actually ready to work with customers to make sure available technologies can be customized. So we don't necessarily say, this is how you use this technology, you can't use it the other way. For example, if they are doing object replication, they have their own policies that they need to be actually just doing. Okay, if the data is going to be replicated from region 1 to region 2, and then how the policy deletion is going to work. Are you going to want to delete the policy when the replication is in place? If so, the objects which are not replicated over to the destination are not going to be completed. So what kind of a data that you're actually just keeping there? So what is the overall thought process by deleting deleting the policies? What exactly did you do from RTO and RPO side? So everything actually very intertwined. So that's why it is so hard to say we only cover,
Yes.
security. We cover everything. So we cover everything in sense of apps, infra, security, identity access management, and then we actually just make sure customer understand the difference between Azure policies and role-based access control. What are all those things? What are the actual demarcation? We make sure they understand it so they can apply. So I always just say that when a customer comes to Azure, they are just going to be not mature for the first couple years in security. So that's why Microsoft has been making tremendous investment. And then our team, which Joe actually manages, we have cloud solution architects. We are actually just adding, new knowledge base and just learning certifications, everything to make sure we are actually just, catching up with what the customers are looking for. Otherwise, it is very difficult. So that's why I always say networking and then apps, infra, and then security, these are the best friends. And then they cannot be separated. That's what I would like to say is my final words for this.
No, that sounds perfect, and that's best friends. That's a nice analogy. That these services
they're
really need to
inseparable.
work together.
Like,
Inseparable.
I mean, if anybody says, "Hey, you know what? I want to only just talk about zero trust," I never seen any examples so far. Whenever I'm talking, I mean, maybe my customer from West Coast, Bob, is listening to it now. I'm sure he does. So there's not even one time that I discuss with him, and then we discuss about only infra. I mean, it's security, infra, apps, everything. It is all intertwined.
So now I still have to ask a last question then. If I'm now a customer, how should I get started? I mean, they cannot all reach out to you, Evren. Do we have some documentation, or what would be a good way? I mean, some customers are already really lucky because you are assigned to them, obviously, but or Daniel, same to you, obviously. But if I don't have a customer, is there some documentation, or should I talk to my account executive, or what would be a good place to start? Because I think when it comes to security in SAP, everyone should really look at this, and they should really get started if they have not done yet.
I would actually just start with Microsoft Azure URLs around, Azure security. And then, like, again, this is not one page. And basically, when the viewer actually just goes through the URL, it is just going to be expanding. So then it is going to be actually given an overview, a holistic view on how Microsoft actually just treats zero trust security model, so that they can actually just compare with their requirements, and then, or they can actually just take a look at their existing requirements and what Microsoft does, and then how this two can actually just marry to make sure that they can adopt some of the best practices that we have. But it's all about them first identifying their requirements and then reaching out to their Microsoft representative to get into the details of the zero trust security for SAP. This, I mean, Daniel, what do you suggest?
Yeah, my suggestion is we do have this awesome page, Architecture Center. And inside the Architecture Center, we do have the Cloud Adoption Framework.
Okay,
I think that's a really good start. I mean, there is several scenarios over there, a breakdown on decisions, what the customers, based on the requirements, what they have to do. I think that's a really good start. And we do have on the Architecture Center, most of the architectures that it doesn't matter what type of solution, if you have a cloud native application, if you're doing more hybrid approach, we do have in each one of those sections a security either like something called security checklist, what we have to account in order to make sure all the aspects of the connectivity, application, identity are in place. So that would be my recommendation for the customers who are starting. And just to add is there is also several approaches on this on the cloud journey. Customers, they are like new to the cloud. Obviously, what they're going to try to do initially is try to replicate as much as they have in on-premises to Azure. And so, like I mentioned earlier, that is, if the customer has a solution from a third party, for sure that solution is going to be also on the Azure marketplace, right? They also, some of the customers, they want to start fresh, right? I want to leverage as much as I can first-party products, and Microsoft in all the aspects has a lot of options on that aspect. And depending on the level of the maturity, obviously they can start trying to concentrate usually in the migration, it's move my data from on-premises to Azure. In the second moment, they can do, which we do have in another page called Well Architected Framework, which is do WAF. which they can do some optimizations on what they have already in Azure, and they can think about on moving away from a third party, implementing a first party. They can also thinking about one classic example on the networking is hub and spoke through virtual WAN. So other connectivity types like we talk about VPN and express route, but also another trend, a lot of customers doing SD-WAN. So those are the aspects that you can, like in the level of maturity, you can find also documentations on the Architecture Center for both beginners and also existing customers. They want to get to the next step.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, perfect. I think you highlighted some really cool, some really important points. You also provided some good outlooks on how to get started. So I think this is really a good starting point for customers. So I hope that lots of customers watching, they either ping you, and I know they will ping Evren. I know they did this in the past. So, but maybe they can also find some documentation, the well-architected framework, as you said. So I think that might be a really good starting point.
The information is so broad, and then if they get lost, so they can absolutely just reach out to their Microsoft representative, so we can get them started.
Sounds good.
Yeah, let me leave a final point. Obviously, these two smart gentlemen, Daniel and Evren, absolutely super knowledgeable, and I'm just sitting here as a bystander, letting these guys do their talented work here. But I want to stay, from my perspective, once again, bring it up to a higher level. When you look at Microsoft's evolution over the years, right, and I talked to some key executives out there in security and across the board, we're still sometimes looked at as a software company from 15, 20 years ago, right? And
absolutely.
As we've evolved, right, then we became sort of this cloud company. And now I'd actually argue that we are literally a security company. I think before anything else, Microsoft is a security company. And I think when customers, especially, still fighting those old thoughts of us being a software company and selling Windows disks, right? When you look at that first slide of all the security applications and whatnot that we have out there, it's sometimes overwhelming. And I think at times people are like, wow, Microsoft has really dipped into the deep end of security. But I just want to say for all the customers out there, listen, we are a security company first and foremost, as we have evolved into this new cloud framework here in 2024. And that's what we talk about in every conversation before we get into the nitty gritty. And it's first and foremost top mind for everything we do, especially as we move into this AI generation that we're sort of evolving into at this point. So feel free to reach out to myself or my team for any conversations around this topic. And thanks for having me here.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Joe, Daniel, Evren. Evren, I know I will have you on the show again in the future, so thanks again. It was great talking to you. Thank you so much for your insights, and we'll definitely talk again.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.